Welcome to Seniors Count. I'm your host, Tula Mall. On our show, we believe that you are the foundation on which Boston was built. So our goal is to connect you to resources, benefits, and information to enhance your life. Thank you for joining us. My guest today is Meg Talon. She's the director of East Boston's YMCA's Teaching Kitchen, where she teaches classes on healthy eating. Today, Meg is here with some tips on how to make food last. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tula, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So we're going to talk about preserving. So why don't you tell us, what we're going to preserve today, and what does that mean?
So preserving can mean a few things. Most people think of preserving as canning and that kind of labor-intensive process, but you can also use your freezer, your oven, your microwave to preserve, and you can preserve using the air. So preserving really just means extending the life of fresh fruit and produce and herbs. And I think it can be very useful if you live alone to know how to preserve if you have leftover fresh products.
Yeah, and sometimes, you get bigger packages of things. Like sometimes it's cheaper to get like the big thing of strawberries, but every time I do that, I think, what am I going to do with all these strawberries?
That's exactly it. So I brought with me a big package of blueberries and raspberries for that reason, because sometimes you have a sale, you see something delicious, you really want it, you use part of it, and then it starts to get moldy in your fridge. So one of the things you can do is just put it on a cookie sheet and stick it in your freezer, and you let it freeze in there, and you want to do this in a single layer. If you freeze it kind of all bunched together, you can get some freezer burn in between the fruit. So you freeze it in a single layer, and you can just then take it and package it in bags separately. So you can have it in your freezer frozen, ready to use in a coffee cake or muffins or whatever you like. I love doing blueberries and blackberries and raspberries as a mix. And you just have to clear a little space out of your freezer though sometimes, because it can be hard to find a spot for a cookie sheet. Sometimes you have to take out a shelf. Once you have it frozen, you can have it in there for 6 months or so.
Okay. Yeah. So do you have to wash them beforehand? So
I would wash and dry them, and I would lay them flat. The only thing to really remember about freezing berries is to just, when you freeze them that initial time, they can be flat. Once they're frozen and ready to use, you bag them up.
Bag them and then put them in the freezer back in there. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really, really nice way to use your
berries. We can do blueberries, blackberries,
raspberries. What
about strawberries?
So strawberries. If you're working with strawberries, what you want to do is you want to take your strawberries and you want to hull them, which means you want to take out the center, cut off the tops, and you want to kind of clean them and have them ready. Same thing. Sheet pan, freeze them. I brought a few different fruits. You can freeze melon as long as you cube it.
I didn't know that.
You just need to wash it and dry it and put it in that single layer.
Okay. So wash it like when it's still covered with the rind. Then cut it up.
Right. I always wash the rind before I cut my melon, because melons grow on the ground and they can be dirty. You can get sick from them. So I always wash my melon anyway, but I would peel it and cut it as long as you just have it in cubes. The idea is to get it in your bags in pieces that you'll use.
Yeah, and sometimes for melon, it's because it's so big. It's like, how much can you eat in one day?
Right,
so it's
and
good to freeze
it molds very quickly. I feel like when you buy fruit, it's delicious that first day or two, and then sometimes it gets moldy, especially in the summertime.
Yeah. It's outside. Or in the warmth of the room.
Exactly. So another thing you can do with fruit that I really like is you can create smoothie packs in your freezer. So if you have some kale and some apple and some banana, you can create essentially a smoothie pack in your freezer that you can use at any time. You could do this with anything. You could take all the fruits we were just looking at now and do this.
Tell me more about what does it mean for a smoothie pack. So you're unwrapping the banana, the kale's been washed.
I've washed my kale, I have everything kind of handy. I think this can work really well if you have some extra time. because you can prepare a few at a time. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to get everything ready that you want in your smoothie.
Yeah. So you got everything here.
I've got everything here. I'm going to take my bag. And again, you could do this with anything.
Yep.
And I'm just going to put everything right in there. I'm going to throw some kale in there. I'm going to throw some apple in there. I'm going to seal it up, and I'm going to label it.
Okay.
I think, you know, one of the things about using the freezer is if you don't label it right away, sometimes you think, oh, I'll remember, I'll know what's in there. But it really is important to label it and date it.
Especially the date, yeah.
Absolutely. So you have the date on it. So you have this ready to go when you wake up in the morning. You pull it out of the freezer. You throw it in your blender with some yogurt, a little juice or no juice,
Easy.
Maybe water, some honey.
The prep's all done.
It's done. And it also is, again, like if you have some produce that you like, you can mix it with fruit and just, you know, not let it go to waste.
And big kale comes in those big bunches too, so it's good way to use that.
Yeah, I feel like they sell kale now by pounds
The
of
bushel.
kale. There's so much kale. I really like the idea of making the smoothie packs because I feel like, especially in the morning, you don't always have the time or the energy to make yourself breakfast. But that way you have...
it's pre-prepared.
You have it prepared.
Yeah. And so I know apples sometimes get brown real quickly. Is that a problem with the freezing?
You can freeze apples. And when you freeze apples, what you want to do is, again, you want to just get rid of your core. And get them into pieces that you think you'll want to eat them in. And then take a fresh lemon. And before you bag your apples up, just take some fresh lemon and squeeze it right in the bag or squeeze it right over the lemons. Same thing with pears. If you have pears, they're going to brown if you don't put some lemon on them.
And then you can take them out and eat them straight away. So you don't need to technically let them like defrost, or what do you recommend for that?
This is what I think about apples and pears and things like that when you freeze them. I feel like it changes the texture. It's not going to be as tasty as a fresh apple. But you can use it in other things and it will keep in your freezer. So if you have some apples ready to go and some lemon and you want to bake an apple pie or you want to make an apple cake or something, you have them ready to go. I don't think they're as tasty as fresh apples.
So it's not for necessarily for snacking of the way you would normally an apple, but in case you get a big bag of apples, this is a way to preserve other apples for future use.
Exactly. I feel like the freezer changes the quality of the produce, but it's still usable. And the idea is just to not be throwing things away.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that's what happens with bigger portions of food.
Right, or if you're living alone and you've bought, a bag of something, you might not get through the whole thing.
How many apples can you eat?
Right, and it's nice to have things in your freezer because if you have something in your freezer, sometimes I feel like it inspires you to do something with it.
Absolutely.
So if you have some great blueberries in your freezer from the summer and it's a cold day in January, you might get inspired to make a blueberry pie or a blueberry cake just to, get a little bit of the summer sun back in your life.
We talked a little bit about freezing. What else? How else can you preserve things?
So the other way you can preserve things is in your oven. So you can dry things in your oven, and essentially what you want to do is make sure that your oven can go down to 140.
Okay, that's important.
Some ovens don't go down
mine
that
doesn't.
low. Yeah, so you just want to look and see that your oven can go down to 140.
Okay.
And essentially you're going to crack the door a little bit, and you're going to use a cookie sheet. And what you want to do is if you want to dry some herbs, say you want to dry some parsley, you just want to take the stems off and get the best part of the parsley. If you're making a smoothie with parsley or some cilantro, you might leave the stems on for nutritional value, but if you're drying something to use it later on, you really don't want a ton of stems on there.
Flour, I guess.
So you're going to turn your oven down to 140. You're going to crack the door a little bit. You can put a towel in the door to keep it open, and it will take about 2 to 3 hours. And you should watch. So
it doesn't burn.
Yeah, you don't want to just leave and leave it, and you don't want to do it when kids are around because you are going to keep the oven door open. But I think the oven door can be safely kept open with a towel, but drying is a great way to preserve herbs in particular and citrus.
Okay. So same thing with the lemon, or oranges, you cut them up, lay them flat on a pan.
Yeah, so with your citrus...
Could you do them together? Is that...
You
Or does
could.
that change the?
You could. You might get some drippings of citrus on your herbs.
Yep.
But with your citrus, you just want to cut and take out your seeds.
Okay.
And the same thing, you're just going to dry it in the oven. Some people buy dehydrators,
Yeah.
but you don't need to do that. If you want to dry things at home, you can just do it in your oven. I think it can be delicious after you dry out citrus in the oven to sprinkle some sugar on it, and then put it in something airtight. With the dried herbs, once they're dried, you can just put them in a bag, just like this, and kind of keep them in there for whenever you want to cook with something.
Oh, so they don't need to be frozen. So once they're dried, you can just use them.
You dry them and you can use them in a container. You can dry potatoes. You can pretty much dry anything you'd like to dry if you have the time. I love to dry herbs at home. You don't even need your oven to dry herbs. You can just hang them from something and let them just get dry. Drying out citrus in the oven is delicious, and you can use that in so many other things. So you can take out a couple of pieces and chop it up and throw it in a cake, or throw it in a pie, or if you're making a pasta dish, if you don't put the sugar on, that can be delicious. Preserved lemon in pasta, or preserved orange in like a chocolate cake with preserved orange is really tasty. Yeah, it can be a great way to use your leftover citrus, which is also another thing. I feel like you go to the grocery store and they'll sell these huge bags of lemons and things, and what are you going to do with?
It's a lot of lemons.
So
you have
many
basil
lemons.
over there. Can
So
you
I have
dry
some basil over here, yes. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was drying in your microwave.
Okay.
Some people don't have an oven or don't want to dry in the oven.
Or it doesn't go down to 140.
It doesn't go down to 140. You can dry herbs in your microwave. You can't really do a lot of other drying in your microwave, but it's great for drying basil. So you want to take your basil. People would probably tell you to wash it first. I don't know if I would wash it, because I feel like once you wash basil, it gets really floppy.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to just be careful of your health, you could wash it. So you can put it between 2 paper towels.
Yep.
Just separate out the leaves a little bit.
It doesn't matter if they touch, right?
Nope.
Just so they have a little bit of room.
Nope. And you put it right in the microwave, and you just put it in there for like 10 seconds at a time and keep peeking at it. It's kind of cool. If you have really fresh basil and you dry it in the microwave, it turns bright green.
Okay.
It looks great.
And it'll dry in the big leaf. So it dries,
it'll
it doesn't
dry,
like crumble or anything.
and then the same thing, you can just put it in a bag and label your bag and use it. Chives, similar.
Okay.
Just dry them up, use them. I brought this package of chives with me from the store. A lot of times when you have a recipe, you end up using
a little bit.
This much of your chives, and then what are you going to do with the rest? Not to mention that herbs are so expensive when you buy them in the store. So I think drying and freezing can be a great way to not keep spending on something that you're going to use a few of, and then it'll go bad and you'll throw it out.
So for chives, you recommend using the microwave, not the oven?
You could do the microwave, you could do the oven, you could hang them and let them dry.
Oh, okay. So you can hang them too.
Yeah, you can do all of those things.
So what else are we going to talk about? What else can we preserve?
Another something that we can do is you can preserve all kinds of vegetables by blanching them. So blanching means boiling briefly. So if you have some fresh carrots or peas or celery, and you haven't used everything in the bag. I got a bag of carrots at the store the other day that had 40 carrots in it.
Wow.
You can kind of cut them up, and then what you want to do is you want to put them in boiling water for really just a minute or two. The idea isn't to cook them through. You're just doing something called blanching. The reason why you are going to blanch your vegetables before you put them away is that if you don't and you put them in the freezer for use later on, they'll kind of keep breaking down, and the enzymes get really slimy. So when you go to use it, it's just going to not be as tasty as it would be. So I have some
So carrots, you can do that way,
here.
cauliflower.
I have some peas.
Wow.
Fresh celery.
Oh, I'm surprised about celery. It seems like it's because it's so full of water that
So
it
when
wouldn't...
you blanch the celery, you do it for 2 to 3 minutes.
Oh, so a little longer.
It is a little bit longer, but what I think can be a great thing to do at home, if you have some extra veggies, is, and I like to use all the
all
celery.
the way to the top.
People throw this part away, but it's tasty. You can even, use this in a salad. But you kind of get all your vegetables prepared the way you would probably want to eat them after you've blanched them.
Okay.
So you get them ready, you have them kind of cut up and ready to go, you blanch them, and then bag them up. Same idea.
Individual servings.
Put them in your freezer. If you're making a soup, or you're making a stir fry, or you're making, maybe a casserole or a lasagna or something, you have these bags ready to go.
Great.
And if you're living alone, you can portion it for your size. If you have a big family, you can do a big bag. But I think these are great to have in the freezer for soups.
Is there something to look at, like when the peas get really green, or is there some sort of something that happens that people can see and say, oh, they're ready, I should take them out now? Or is it a minute?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it's really just getting it in the boiling water for a minute or so, and not too much longer, except for the celery. The celery needs a little bit longer.
And then do you want to cool them off right away? Because I know if you don't, sometimes when you're cooking, they'll keep cooking.
So some people are particular about this, and what they'll do is they'll blanch their vegetables and then put them right into a ice water bath. And that will immediately stop the cooking. Which will keep the color bright. If you don't mind that the color isn't going to be bright, especially if you think you're going to take it out and put it in a soup or something that you're going to bake, you don't need to do that. But if you are wanting it to look really sharp, then yes, the ice bath will stop the cooking process immediately. And make it look better. And so do you need to wait till they cool off to put them in the bag and put them in the freezer? Or? I would let them cool off and I would dry them off a little bit. The drier things are when you get them into the freezer, they won't get a lot of ice crystals on the outside and they won't get that freezer burn as quickly. I mean, I think if you leave it in for more than 2 to 3 months, you're probably going to have freezer burn anyway. Sometimes I think like the freezer, people feel like they just put it in and it can be in there forever. I grew up in a family like that where things were just went in the freezer and never returned. But they do need to be used within a certain amount of time or else they'll get freezer burn. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I did have moments. There's been moments in my young adult life where I'm like, how long has this been in here? It's like, okay, if you're guessing, it's probably time to throw it out. Right, and that's the reason why, I keep some tape in the kitchen. I always keep a pen nearby, and I just throw a label on everything with a date, and then I'm not guessing. Whenever I don't do that, And you're looking in there. Where is that from? I know, exactly. All right, what else are you going to show us today for the other thing I wanted to talk about was pickling. Because canning at home can be a little complicated, but pickling can actually be quite simple. It's not a very big deal. So what do you need for pickling? What is the... So to pickle... Not only the ingredients, but the items that you need. To pickle, you don't need a lot. If you're canning, you need a lot of boiling water and instruments and so on, but for pickling, we don't. So here you got some containers. So we have some containers, and I think one of the most successful pickling and easiest pickling items to start off with are onions. Okay. Oh. So again, an onion is something that you buy in bulk, and it's big, and you make something with it, and you usually have a lot left over. So if you have a great red onion, you can pickle it. Good. And essentially what you want to do when you're pickling is you want to use some really tasty vinegar. I like rice wine vinegar. I think it's really yummy. And sugar. Oh, okay. And the ratio is about 2/3 of a cup of rice wine vinegar and 1/3 of a cup of sugar. Okay. And to 1 cup of whatever you're pickling. Okay. So essentially 2/3 vinegar, 1/3 sugar, 1 cup of
product.
The product.
Yeah, the
So
produce.
you are going to boil your vinegar, you're going to get it really hot, and you're going to put your sugar in there and stir it around till it melts. And then you'll let that cool off a little bit. And you'll put your onions and so on right in your jar.
Yep.
And you can cut them in any shape that you like.
Okay.
And you'll pour that mixture right in,
Okay.
in your jar, and you can keep it in there and let it cool off and then just seal it.
Once it's cool.
Once
and
it's
then just
cool.
hand seal it. No special things, right? So just
Because we're just doing a quick
Okay.
pickle. It won't last forever. You can have it in your fridge for 2 to 3 weeks.
okay.
But pickled onions are delicious on sandwiches. They're great in salads. Again, if you're making a stir fry or some cornbread and you throw some pickled onions in there, it's a different flavor and it's really, really tasty.
So can you add things like if you want them a little garlicky,
yes.
right? Could I put a clove of garlic in there or some of my dried herbs?
Yes. So traditionally, you would throw in some thyme and you throw in some black peppercorn and maybe some red peppercorn. But you don't have to have those things.
Okay.
You don't have to feel like you can't
Just put
can't do it if you just
away.
have some vinegar, which mostly everyone has at home, and sugar. You can be pickling. I think fresh herbs inside pickled items are delicious. So, you know, that is really good. I wanted to talk about another pickle that you can do with that same ratio.
Okay.
So you're 2/3 of vinegar and you're 1/3 of sugar.
And so you have rice vinegar here, right? So can you use just regular
You can use
distilled?
any kind of
So any
vinegar.
kind of vinegar is good.
The vinegar is just the medium.
Okay.
So the other one that I love is carrots
Yep.
with hot pepper and pineapple.
Oh, and then what do you do with that when it's pickled?
So you do the same thing. You just want to get everything in here. If you have some pineapple in your pantry,
And are these about 1 cup, just so people know, these little guys? Or
I
can't
think
tell?
they're approximately a cup.
It says 6 ounces. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
All
a
right.
little bit
It's
under a
just
cup.
Good for people to
But
know like, the size.
if you put in a little bit of pineapple in with your carrots and then pour your pickling juices over
Yep.
again and just let it cool and then seal it. This is one of my favorites. I love pickled carrots. They're
Yeah.
delicious with dill. I like fresh dill in there. And then of course there's always the cucumber.
So how long before you can eat this? Or once it's
You can
pickled,
eat it
of
right
course.
away.
Right away.
I think it will taste better if you give it a little time.
So what would you say, a day? Like what's a little time?
Yeah, maybe
Or-
a day or two.
Okay.
The onions get really pretty. They get really red. All of the red bleeds out.
Okay.
And so you get some nice color in there.
Yeah, I pickled some radishes and I didn't take the skin off, and then basically the whole container was red.
Right.
Like the juices.
Right,
were
and
red.
it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to, look like $1 million. You can put little pieces in. You can put all your leftover scraps in.
Yeah.
You don't have to just use, your best looking pieces. I think you can even keep a bag of scraps in your fridge
Yeah.
if you're making a salad, and then
Whatever's
throw them in a
left,
jar and make do a quick pickle with that.
Well, so if you can believe it, we're almost out of time.
Great.
Where can people go if they want to learn more about this? I know that you teach at the YMCA.
So I teach at
but-
the East Boston YMCA, and we have a lot of classes there. For seniors, we have a class every other Monday in East Boston. I also think if you go on any computer and Google canning and pickling and preserving, there's so many people that have tips for many more things to do at home. This is just a few
Starter.
ideas, yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming in and showing us how to preserve a lot of our food, our fruits and our herbs and some of our vegetables. I think it was very interesting and, a great way to add flavor to your food, like you said.
Great way to have
So,
flavor.
thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Thank you for watching Seniors Count, brought to you by Mayor Martin J. Walsh and our Commissioner Emily Shea. To contact us, please call 617-635-4366 or the Mayor's 24-hour hotline at 617-635-4500. You may email us at elderly@boston.gov, or you can find us on Facebook. Take care and see you next time.
What a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself.